Alright guys, next section is called complex numbers. So, a complex number deals with what we call imaginary numbers. So, imaginary numbers, I stands for imaginary number. Little I here. Okay, weird looking I, but that's alright. Stands for an imaginary unit or imaginary number. Okay, kind of like imaginary friends. Okay, I got plenty of those, and no, not really. But in these cases, you actually use imaginary numbers for real things. Imaginary friends don't do us any good, right? But in this case, imaginary numbers are actually used for engineers. So if somebody wants to become an engineer, you deal with kind of measuring electricity, stuff like that. You actually use imaginary numbers. All the details how, I'm not quite sure, but they are used. Okay, so they are beneficial. Okay, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, stuff like that, use imaginary numbers. But anyway, so we'll call this I. What is I? Well, if you remember, like if we did the square root of 9, if I said, what is the square root of 9? You would say 3. If I said, what is the square, why is it 3? Because 3 squared is 9. If I say, what is the square root of 4? You'd say 2, because 2 squared is 4. But what if I said square root of negative 4? What squared gives me negative 4? Nothing, right? Negative 2 squared actually gives me positive 4. So this answer isn't negative 2. This can't happen. So they made up an imaginary unit to be able to do problems like this. Okay? So I will stand for the square root of negative 1. So anytime you see square root of negative 1, really that is the imaginary number I. Okay? Understand this. There's one more thing you should know based off of this. What if I squared this side? And that becomes I squared. Okay? What if I squared this side? So I square this side, it becomes I squared. I square this side, what does that become? What is square root of negative 1 squared? Well, square and a square root cancel, right? And you're left with negative 1. I need you to know these two ideas right here. I is the square root of negative 1, or I squared is just negative 1. Okay? Memorize those two, write those down. We're going to use those later. Alright, so we're going to use the imaginary unit when we solve equations right now. So here we go. First equation to solve. Just like normal, we see an x squared. We don't see any bx, so we're just going to get x by itself. Okay, so minus 11, minus 11. 2x squared equals, what is this, negative 48. Divide by 2, just like normal. Everything's normal, except for the end. This is x squared equals, what's this, negative 24, right? Now here's the deal. Normally you'd say, okay, well how do I get x by itself? Oh, I square root it. I square root that side to get x equals, since I squared x squared, remember, plus or minus, right? Square root of negative 24. So here's the tricky part. How do you do square root of negative 24? Well, let me show you. Square root of negative 24. Let's break those up into factors like normal. Well, you would say 4 and 6 make 24, or negative 4, or positive 6, something like that. I always do this though. I always make it negative 1 times 24. Okay? Square root of negative 24 is negative 1 times 24. So I do this. Square root of negative 1 times the square root of 24. Why do I do that? Because I know what the square root of negative 1 is. Basically, if there's a negative underneath the root, pull out a square root of negative 1. Okay? Because I told you what that is. I is equal to square root of negative 1. So I just substitute I right here. Now, so far I got x equals plus or minus. Instead of this, I put I, imaginary number, times the square root of 24. But you guys know how to break down square root of 24. Let's do that now. Square root of 24, square root of 4, square root of 6. So this becomes 2 square root of 6, right? 2 root 6. Okay, so but we still have this I out here. Here's where people get confused. They're not sure what to do with the I. Always keep it outside and being multiplied to what's going on. So really should have, well, it looks ugly if we do this. I 2 root 6. No, actually, it goes right in between the root and the number. So instead of, it was I out here, so I'll put it right here. I 2 root 6. I 2. No, that doesn't sound good. That's like saying x2, right? No, it's 2x, right? Instead of saying I 2, we're going to say 2I square roots of 6, but it's also plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus 2I root 6. So basically the only thing different is if there's a negative underneath, you're going to have an imaginary number I. Okay? So you just have to know where to put it. Outside the square root, never inside. Okay? That's it for example 1.